In November 2003, 3 years after the release of A Storm of Swords, George R.R. Martin was asked about the Dance of the Dragons, which up to that point was only vaguely referenced in the series. Will we find out more about the Dance of the Dragons in future books? The first dance or the second? The second will be the subject of a book. The first will be mentioned from time to time, I'm sure. The Targaryen Civil War was periodically referenced in the main series, but we only got the full scope of it with the release of Fire and Blood, 7 years after the release of A Dance of Dragons, which introduced the character of young Griff, the supposedly miraculously surviving son of Rhaegar Targaryen, but actually most likely a descendant of House Blackfyre from the female line. Thus, the answer seemed obvious to everyone. The second Dance of the Dragons will have to happen between Aegon Blackfyre assuming the identity of Rhaegar's son and Daenerys Targaryen, the actual last legitimate Targaryen alive, with Aegon taking the role of Aegon II and Daenerys taking the role of Rhaenyra, with their genders once more being the point of contention in their respective claims. The fallout is almost always linked with the inevitable destruction of King's Landing. This theory is so widely believed that to deny it is seen as akin to denying established canon, even though most, if not all, variants of this theory have glaring holes. Chief of them a comment George made mere 3 years later after his initial claims of the incoming second dance. The second Dance of Dragons does not have to mean Daenerys invasion. George stopped himself short and said he shouldn't say anymore. That, however, is still vague enough to be disregarded, and many people did so. But then, 16 years later, a second plane has hit that theory. When George was interviewed on the History of Westeros podcast, he was asked whether the events of Fire and Blood are meant to be setups for the future events of the story. So we've observed it in A Song of Ice and Fire. Have you found that in writing Fire and Blood, that it allows you to maybe play with plotlines or arcs for the characters in the main series? Do you do that consciously? No, I don't! It's not consciously. Certain similarities are inevitable. If anything, I try to veer away from that, because I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself. And, well, isn't that obvious? What's the point of writing the same storyline twice, especially since most predictions assume that not only will it play out the same, but also end in the same exact way, with the female claimant's downfall? So, if it's not yet another Targaryen civil war, what will be that second Dance of the Dragons? Before we start, remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share, so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Also, you can listen to this on Spotify if you prefer. Check the link in the description. The Dance of the Dragons was a succession crisis halfway through the Targaryen reign, caused by the question of whether a woman could inherit the Iron Throne. The war strongly and violently enforced the idea that no, having a certain set of organs delegates you to the role of a Bradmer, inherently incapable of holding positions of authority. The war was so devastating that it saw dragons go extinct until they were revived by Daenerys Targaryen, Rhaenyra's descendant. In A Clash of Kings, Daenerys visits the mysterious House of the Undying, where she receives a strange set of prophecies. One of them depicts a cloth dragon swaying on poles amidst a cheering crowd, followed by Mother of Dragons, Slayer of Lies. Dany discusses this later with Jorah Mormont. A Mummer's dragon, you said. What is a Mummer's dragon, pray? A cloth dragon on poles, Dany explained. Mummers use them in their follies, to give the heroes something to fight. In A Dance with Dragons, Quaithe, a shadowbinder Dany met in Carve, gives her a peculiar warning. No, hear me, Daenerys Targaryen. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the Pale Mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. beware the perfumed seneschal. People who believe Aegon to be the real son of Rhaegar and Elia sometimes theorize that Aegon is the son's son since his mother was a Martell, but I don't subscribe to this theory since the narrative only ever positions Aegon as Rhaegar's son, and the son's son is clearly Quentyn Martell. Aegon is the mummer's dragon for 2 reasons. Varys, one of Aegon's kingmakers, used to be a mummer in his youth. An expression often used in universe to denote something ridiculous is a mummer's farce. And well, if you think about it, everyone around young Griff is a mummer of some sort. Lemore is a septa that isn't so chaste since she gave birth, Haldon isn't really a maester, and so on. Moreover, they all put up a performance for him, of the commoner king. But all of that is exactly that, a mummer's force. One of Arianne's sample chapters in The Winds of Winter gives a following exchange. It is dragons. Dragons, asked her mother. Theora, don't be mad. I'm not, they're coming. How could you possibly know that? Her sister asked, with a note of scorn in her voice. One of your little dreams. Theora gave a tiny nod, chin trembling. They were dancing, in my dream, and everywhere the dragons danced, the people died. These are all strong indications that something akin to another dance could happen between Dany and Aegon, and it may involve uncovering what is Aegon's true identity. However, there are still several problems with that assumption. Firstly, the Dance of the Dragons was not called that just because 2 Targaryens were involved in that war, but mainly because it was a war where dragon fought the dragon. It was upon the 22nd day of the 5th moon of the year 130 AC when the dragons danced and died above the god's eye. If it was just about Targaryens being involved, the Blackfyre rebellions could have instead been called the Dance of the Black and Red Dragon, but it's not the case. For the war to truly be a dance, actual dragons have to be involved, and they need to metaphorically dance in disguise. But well, of course, Aegon is such an important and skilled character that he could easily steal a dragon with no sweat, right? Well, not really. Dany's dragons only truly obey her, as exemplified by Quentyn. The dragon came down between the Dornishmen and the door, with a roar that would have sent 100 lions running. His head moved side to side as he inspected the intruders. Dornishmen, windblown, Kago. Last and long as the beast stared at Pretty Mary's, sniffing. The woman, Quentyn realized. He knows that she is female. He is looking for Daenerys. He wants his mother and does not understand why she's not here. Down, the prince commanded. You must not let him smell your fear. Down, down, down. He brought the whip around and laid a lash across the dragon's face. Viserion hissed. Quentyn turned and threw his left arm across his face to shield his eyes from the furnace wind. Rhaegal, he reminded himself. The green one is Rhaegal. When he raised his whip, he saw that the lash was burning. His hand as well. All of him was burning. Oh, he thought. Then he began to scream. I think that Quentyn's story exists for some reason other than being barbecued for shock value. Namely, it establishes that some guy stealing a dragon is impossible. Dany's bond with her children is different from other Targaryen dragon bonds, since all 3 of them obey her and only her, and it will only be with her permission that they get mounted by someone else. I see no reason why Aegon would be any different. Even Daenerys herself had troubles taming Dragon, in spite of being his mother. No, was all that she had time to say. No, not me, don't you know me? The black teeth closed inches from her face. He meant to tear my head off. The sand was in her eyes. She stumbled over the pitmaster's corpse and fell on her backside. Then I hit him. No, she screamed, swinging the lash with all the strength that she had in her. The dragon jerked his head back. No, she screamed again. No. The barbs raked along his snout. Dragon rose, his wings covering her in shadow. Then he swung the lash at his scaled belly, back and forth, until her arm began to ache. His long serpentine neck bent like an archer's bow. With a hiss, he spat black fire down at her. Then he darted underneath the flames, swinging the whip and shouting, No, 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 get down! His answering roar was full of fear and fury, full of pain. His wings beat once, twice, and folded. The dragon gave one last hiss and stretched out flat upon his belly. Black blood was flowing from the wounds where the spear had pierced him, smoking where it dripped onto the scorched sands. He's fire-made flesh, she thought. And so am I. So, I don't think that a guy who couldn't even move when a stone man attacked him would be able to just steal a dragon like an electric scooter. Another issue is purely logistical. In A Dance with Dragons, young Griff had already landed in Westeros, and Arianne's sample chapters in The Winds of Winter show that He had already started his campaign. Daenerys, on the other hand, is still stranded at the Dothraki Sea. She has to go to Vaes Dothrak, unite the Dothraki, return to Meereen to, at the very least, gather her armies and dragons. There also exists a heavy setup for her making a stop in Volantis. I am no lady, the widow replied, just Vogara's whore. You want to be gone from here before the tigers come. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek, where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. The journey from Westeros to Meereen took Tyrion the entirety of A Dance with Dragons, and he was traveling alone, without huge armies and 3 dragons. And while Daenerys finishes her business in Essos, characters in Westeros certainly won't just stand idly and wait for her to come. Jon Con, I wish I burned Stony Sept when I had a chance, is already making moves, and sooner or later he will march on King's Landing, which will be at the state of chaos, with Kevan Lannister dead, Sand Snakes out for blood, and psychologically broken Cersei, I love wildfire and both of my brothers compare me to the Mad King Lannister, in charge of everything. The confrontation between Cersei and Jon Con will see King's Landing burn, and a dragon is not necessary to launch this cautious of wildfire. Tyrion's conversations with Aegon on Shymate has an interesting tidbit in it. I told you I know our little queen. Let her hear that her brother Rhaegar's murdered son is still alive, that this brave boy has raised the dragon standard of her forebears in Westeros once more, that he is fighting a desperate war to avenge his father and reclaim the Iron Throne for House Targaryen, hard pressed on every side, and she will fly to your side as fast as wind and water can carry her. You are the last of her line, and this mother of dragons, this breaker of chains, is above all a rescuer. I hope your grace will pardon me. Your king is trapped. Death in 4. The prince stared at the playing board. My dragon is too far away to save you. You should have moved her to the center of the battle. But you said, I lied. Trust no one, and keep your dragon close. I think this is meant to foreshadow that Aegon doomed his case the moment he decided to land without Daenerys. Tyrion is right about one thing. Daenerys is a rescuer. She is not obsessed with reclaiming the throne for herself, and won't throw a temper tantrum when she learns that the presumed surviving son of Rhaegar already took it. If anything, she will be both relieved and overjoyed at the prospect that she is not the last Targaryen, and that the house won't end with her. She felt very lonely all of a sudden. Mirri Maz Duur had promised that she would never bear a living child. House Targaryen will end with me. That made her sad. You must be my children, she told the dragons. My 3 fierce children. Arstan says dragons live longer than men, so you will go on after I am dead. You could, of course, make an argument that she already will know that Aegon is a blackfyre, and that will motivate her to slay the lie of him being Rhaegar's son, and prevent a blackfyre pretender from usurping the throne. But then again, the situation between the Blackfyres and Targaryens has changed. They were both exiled, and both share a common goal. So what's stopping them from uniting the 2 feuding bloodlines to achieve it, the way it happened after the Wars of the Roses? Especially since Dany has this thought. 5 Aegons had ruled the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. There would have been a 6th, but the usurper's dogs had murdered her brother's son when he was still a babe at the breast. If he had lived, I might have married him. Aegon would have been closer to my age than Viserys. A dragon cannot just be stolen, much less Stannis dragons, who only obey her. There is, however, a way to bind a dragon to your will. What is often conveniently ignored in the theories about Aegon and Daenerys dancing is the existence of a certain pirate who claims to have sailed to Valyria and obtained a dragon horn. I know as much of war as you do, Crow's Eye, Asha said. Aegon Targaryen conquered Westeros with dragons. And so shall we, Euron Greyjoy promised. That horn you heard I found among the smoking ruins that were Valyria, where no one has dared to walk but me. You heard its call, and felt its power. It is a dragon horn, bound with bands of red gold and Valyrian steel graven with enchantments. The dragon lords of old sounded such horns, before the doom devoured them. With this horn, Iron Man, I can bind dragons to my will. Asha laughed aloud. A horn to bind goats to your will would be of more use, Crow's Eye. There are no more dragons. Again, girl, you are wrong. There are 3, and I know where to find them. Surely that is worth a driftwood crown. That night, for the first time, he brought forth the dragon horn that the Crow's Eye had found amongst the smoking wastes of Great Valyria. A twisted thing it was, 6 feet long, from end to end, gleaming black and banded with red gold and dark Valyrian steel. Euron's hell horn. Victarion ran his hands along it. The horn was as warm and smooth as the dusky woman's tights, and so shiny that he could see a twisted likeness of his own features in its depths. Strange sorcerer's writings had been cut into the bands that girded it. Valerian glyphs, Mokoro called them. That much Victarion had known. What do they say? Much and more. The black priest pointed to one golden band. Here the horn is named. I am Dragonbinder, it says. Have you ever heard it sound? Once. One of his brother's mongrels had sounded the hell horn at the Kingsmoot on Old Wick. A monster of a man he had been, huge and shaved-headed, with rings of gold and jet and jade around arms thick with muscle, and a great hawk that hewed across his chest. The sound it made. It burned somehow, as if my bones were on fire, searing my flesh from within. Those writings glowed red-hot, then white-hot, and painful to look upon. It seemed as if the sound would never end. It was like a long scream, 1,000 screams, all melted into one. And the man who blew the horn, what of him? He died. There were blisters on his lips after. His beard was bleeding too. The captain thumped his chest. The hawk, just here. Every feather dripping blood. I heard the man was all burned up inside, but that might just have been some tale. A true tale. Mokoro turned the hell horn, examining the queer letters that crawled across a second of the golden bands. Here it says, "No mortal man shall sound me and live." Bitterly Victarion brooded on the treachery of brothers. Euron's gifts are always poisoned. The crow's eye swore this horn would bind dragons to my will. But how will that serve me if the price is death? Your brother did not sound the horn himself, nor must you. Mokoro pointed to the band of steel. Here. Blood for fire, fire for blood. Who blows the hell horn matters not. The dragons will come to the horn's master. You must claim the horn. With blood. The dragon horn will make a sound in the winds of winter, I'm certain of it. I, however, don't think that it will be Victarion who will claim a dragon. I believe that Euron had already binded the dragon horn to himself. The first long night was caused by the blood betrayal, wherein the Bloodstone Emperor slew his sister, the Amethyst Empress. When the daughter of the Opal Emperor succeeded him as the Amethyst Empress, her envious younger brother cast her down and slew her, proclaiming himself the Bloodstone Emperor, and beginning a reign of terror. He practiced dark arts, torture, and necromancy, enslaved his people, took a tiger woman for his bride, feasted on human flesh, and cast down the true gods to worship a black stone that had fallen from the sky. In the annals of the Further East, it was the blood betrayal, as his usurpation is named, that ushered in the age of darkness called the Long Night. Euron's character is very reminiscent of the Bloodstone Emperor. He does practice dark arts, torture, and slavery. I'm not sure about the cannibalism and necromancy, but he may as well do that too. Interestingly enough, the sea stone chair is made out of an oily black stone, similar to the one worshipped by the Bloodstone Emperor. Lord Balon occupied the sea stone chair, carved in the shape of a great kraken from an immense block of oily black stone. Legend said that the first man had found it standing on the shore of Old Wick when they came to the Iron Island. Daenerys is similarly tied to the Emperors of the Dawn, and particularly to the Amethyst Empress. She sees them in her third dragon dream in A Game of Thrones. Ghosts lined the hallway, dressed in the faded raiment of kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair of silver and hair of gold and hair of platinum white, and their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. Faster, they cried. Faster, faster. She raced, her feet melting the stone wherever they touched. Faster, the ghosts cried as one, and she screamed and threw herself forward. A great knife of pain ripped down her back, and she felt her skin tear open and smelled the stench of burning blood and saw the shadow of wings. And Daenerys Targaryen flew. The Dragon Queen awaits me in Meereen, the fairest woman in the world, if my brother could be believed. Her hair is silver gold, her eyes are amethysts. The death of the Amethyst Empress ushered the world into the Long Night, much like Aegon II Targaryen's usurpation of Rhaenyra Targaryen, which caused the death of dragons and gave rise to the new Long Night. Daenerys' link to the Amethyst Empress is, thus, not accidental. Her dragons will dance again against Euron Greyjoy. The second dance of the dragons, thus, will, according to me, be fought between Euron and Daenerys after he successfully steals a dragon using the Dragonbinder. How will that dance look like? Which dragon will be stolen? How will that dance end? We can only speculate. The second dance of the dragons between Daenerys and Aegon is not as firmly set in stone as the fans believe. There is a lot of setup for a clash between Euron and Daenerys. This time the dance will be more fantastical than political, and the stakes will be more than just the Iron Throne. Euron does have a capability to actually steal a dragon and make him dance, contrary to a certain blackfyre pretender. Personally, I would find that far more exciting than a copy-paste from Fire and Blood, especially since, again, George does not want to repeat himself, and the second dance does not have to mean Daenerys' invasion. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. And remember, Phoenix rises from the ashes, and ashes always stand on top.